So first in Blender, we're going to add a plane. So I'll delete this cube and just add a plane. You can rename it city if you want. And I'm going to add a subdivision surface modifier to this. Add modifier sub B. I'll give it about 8 subdivisions. Oh, actually, maybe 6. Fine, that will do 8. Pixabay. And we're going to switch over to simple, which means it will maintain its original shape, but still subdivide. And when we're done with that, we can just apply that to the plane. The little drop down here. Apply or Control A. Oh, just click on the digit and type in 8. You can go as high as you want to, just kind of stop it. Usually you wouldn't need to apply 6 levels of subdivision to something. If it was a character model, it would be overkill. In this case, we're just adding more geometry for the next step. Applied. And you see a lot of subdivision. Huge amount. After this, going to add a displacement modifier. Add modifier. Deform. Displace. You got a question?
Oh no, I'm just are you gonna add texture to it, and then are you gonna add a texture to the displace modifier?
Yes. You know what's happening. What do you think the texture is going to be?
Huh?
What do you think the texture is going to be? I'm going to add. No.
Oh.
No. You only get one guess. Sorry. Okay. Musgrave's a great guess, though. Yeah. You're on the right track. It's going to be a generated texture. Yeah.
Okay. Or marble?
Sorry.
Okay. I feel like over here.
Anyway, add the displace modifier. I'm just going to add a new texture, as Vin just said. Texture local. And that's created a texture, but in order to modify it, I need to go to the texture properties panel, which is down the very bottom. You see the coordination between symbol and symbol. So down in my texture properties, see there's my texture, and I want to change the type to clouds, not marble, clouds. So I generated noise pattern, and then it's displacing based on the dark and light to go higher and lower. I'm going to change the noise basis to cell noise. Oh, I'll just click on it. From Blender Original to cell noise. And now you see cubic shapes being formed. Can you see the city? I'm just going to adjust the size and the depth as well. Size, I'll bring it down to 0.2. Depth, I'll say 1. And color, I'm going to select color instead of grayscale. Give a color gradient. So rather than light and dark, it's going between the hue values as well. It's still registering light and dark, but the color hues are affecting it. So it's less severe in the change between them, between color and grayscale. Oh, and I should probably change it to hard, actually. Yeah. Okay, back in the modifier. Oh, yeah, yes. One more setting. Sorry. Down in clouds, I want to enable the color ramp. So in colors, you need to roll that down. I'm going to enable color ramp. This is in the texture properties, I should point out. And as I said, it's reading the light or dark for the height. If we drag these sliders closer to the center, we get a more severe climb. So you'll notice with some of these, it's kind of curved almost, slanted, angled, fading into each other. And I'm just going to drag these sliders in the color ramp closer. You'll see the texture is changing as well. And you see if they're all so close together, it's almost a blocky maze. You just want to find a good balance where you're happy with the shape. I'd say somewhere towards the center with the black slider is good for me. And when you're happy with those settings, we can apply the displace modifier as well. So back in modifier stack, we're just going to apply displace. And at this point, always a good idea to save your work if you've done something. Save as. So next I'm just going to set up my camera, and the camera is important for this because we're going to use it to project our UVs onto this model. So first I'll just jump into my camera view, toggle the camera view. No, actually, I'll get a good view, good angles I like. Here I'm looking from the front, maybe a little bit off to an angle. Perspective-wise, for my actual big city, just trying to get a decent lineup that would match these things here, basically. So my horizon line here is approximately there. Vanishing point is actually off to the side. But I get a good idea of the perspective. I can see a tiny sliver of the top of the building. I'm just going to use this one as my basis. So if any of my buildings can match this kind of rotation, then that's good. I can use this for mapping. So, a little sliver of roof showing. I'm going to say there's one in the center as a tiny little sliver of roof. I'm now going to align my camera to my current view. I'm pretty happy with that. View, align active camera to view. And I'll just move my camera to the perspective I have right now. And then if I want to adjust it a little bit more, we can select it and then press G to move it around. I find it easier to get into my viewport properties, into view. And I just want to lock my camera to the view for the moment. Once it's locked, anytime I rotate my view, the camera is going to orbit with it. I can position it a little bit more naturally than selecting and grabbing and moving it around. So viewport properties, N to bring those up, or the little arrow. Just turn on camera to view. in view. Shortcut N to bring that menu up or throw it away. And now as I rotate my view, my camera is going to move with it. Zoom in and out. See my camera frame is coming with me. And I'm pretty much happy with that. When you're happy with your lineup, I'm just going to disable camera to view. And then I want to lock my camera. So I've turned that off, camera to view. I'm just going to make sure I cannot select and move this later. It will cause me issues. To do that, I'm going to go up to my outliner. Here are my restriction toggles. And I just want to enable the selectable filter. And this will mean anything I uncheck with selectable cannot be clicked on, cannot be moved until we recheck this in the outliner. So very useful in environment work. You want to keep everything in place. Maybe you have a lot of objects around the place. You don't want them to move. Enable this toggle. Turn on restriction, and then for camera, unselect selectable. Now I cannot touch it. Okay, time for a little bit of cleaning, optimizing the geometry a little bit. So I can leave my camera view. I can press N, get rid of that. Leave my camera view. And if there's any straggling pieces that you see that are awkward and you want to get rid of, we can literally just go into edit mode and start deleting vertices. So for example, I've got this one point right here. It's awkward looking. Just jump into edit mode and you can see that one vertex is out of the way. We can delete it, we can bring it back down and dissolve it, whatever you want to do. I'll just say delete vertices or dissolve vertices, get rid of it. And there are other areas that are just flat, that aren't buildings, that maybe we could clean up later. But for now, what I want to do is clean up this geometry. So we could go through and start decimating parts of it. By going to mesh, clean up and decimate. Anyone know what decimate means? Either in just normal English or in Blender. Put up? Yes. The term is from war. Decimate. Reduce their numbers by tenfold. Decimal. So yes, it will take this geometry and reduce it and make it simpler, especially if they're all sharing the same orientation. So this is a flat surface. There is no need for all of these faces to be here. Decimate's going to do that. If I select it, clean up, decimate, I can bring up this little slider, bring the ratio down, and you see it's destroying them. Oh, until there's nothing. So too much, and it's gone completely. So it's refactored that. There are less faces, less tries than before. But going through this whole city and doing that would be a pain in the arse. So let's not do that. Just showing you that it's there. If you need to do some specific cleanup on specific parts of your mesh, cleanup is there. Decimate. So we are going to use decimate, but we're going to use the modifier decimate for the whole object. So I'll go back to object mode. Add the modifier decimate. And I'm going to select planar. Without changing any settings, that has already reduced our faces to 1058. Oh, I probably should have got a face count beforehand. But even though it looks identical, it has removed all those faces. So there's our current face set. It's taking a moment to load because it's calculating all of this decimation. I'm not going to change anything at all. I'm just going to go to apply right here. Oh, and sorry, should point out that the angle limit refers to any variance in faces. So if we've a face and then another face, that's perfectly at 0, 0 degrees. If a face next to it goes up anywhere beyond 5 degrees, which is a very, very slim margin, if it goes anywhere beyond that, then it won't be collapsed. So it'll register that as a change in direction. Anything that's below that will just be flattened because it's so close to being the same rotation. That's what angle limit refers to. Again, let's just click apply. Wait a second for it to load. And now back in edit mode, these are my faces. You can see it's reduced it significantly. Save your work again. Okay, now we can start shading this thing. We're going to jump over to our shading workspace. We'll add a new material for the city. I'll call it city text. I'm just going to drag and drop my image texture right in here into the shader window. Tokyo skyline. And just plug the color into the base color. So if you rotate around, you'll see it's streaking all of the colors. But if you remember, our base object was a plane, which means it had a normal direction of face down. So the projection is going to be face down. If I rotate my city, we can see the magic eye trick of, oh, there's the original image. Perfectly flat. So it's all projected perfectly straight down at the moment. If I rotate, you see that thing change. So there's a cool magic trick you can do for people. Hide an image in geometry. Okay, next we're going to use our projection method to create a quick city. So go to UV editing. In edit mode, I'm going to select all my faces, like so. You see that's their arrangement now. And I'll turn on material preview here so we can see it. And I'm going to use UV project from view. Oh, actually, do I need to? Aha. So UV project from view takes our current orientation, our current 3D view perspective, and then creates a UV projection in the map, like for like. So you can see it's reflected there, the exact same angle I have in the 3D viewport. Obviously, I want to project from view using the camera. So in my viewport, I'm going to jump into the camera here. And then use UV, project from view. And you see all of the UVs are actually projected almost in 3D space, or simulated 3D space in 2D. And I should point out that this technique is from Ian Hubert. I've used
So
this
most
before.
complex
Very
stuff can be
useful.
abstracted if you get
So this is what the method we're basically going to employ, just to explain it in 1 minute.
the form and texture anywhere close to right. Leaves, crowds, trees. Look at that tree. It's so naughty. With that in mind, model a city. Big cubes, little cubes, stacked cubes. Select a few edges and bevel them. I'm keeping everything as one object. Create a new material in the shader editor and give it a gray, smooth, glossy material. Create a brick texture and plug it into the displacement. It'll aim straight down, so we gotta rotate it. So add a texture coordinate node and use object. With the eyedropper, select a random cube and rotate it 90 degrees on the x-axis and 45 on z, and then scale it so it looks like windows. Turn off the offset and you're good. You can also mix in a Mudsgrave texture, just to give the windows a bit of extra warble. Nice! Take a nice city picture with lots of clean windows and mix that image texture in with an add shader. Rotate to a diagonal and hit U Project from View to project every side at once. In the UV editor, slide the UVs around so you're not getting a bunch of sky in your buildings. Make it look nice. I'm gonna make a cube with a red emit shader. Give this city a hair-type particle system, with a source type as verts. Have it render as an object, the beacon, on every vertex. Oh, I dig it. To make little hazy bits, set an emission shader as the shader's volume, so you can sculpt the feel of the city and add depth. And that's it. It's low poly, so you can have thousands of... Is this dystopian? Why does this keep happening?
Yeah, so fast technique. And we're basically going to use the same thing. It looks very confusing right now, and yeah, I understand. It will look like that. There are two ways you can go about doing this. We can start selecting face by face using the circle brush, is probably the best one. Oh, and I'll go back to solid view. It's going to be confusing as all hell to look at this. And we can literally just grab a face at a time, front face at a time, or you can grab whole buildings. Grab the extra parts. Circle select with C. I can just paint whole sections. And we basically take them as individual parts, individual buildings, and then try and scale and fit them in. So once I have something selected, I jump over to this window, press A to select everything, and I can move this thing in. So I'll bring back to material preview so you can see as I'm scaling it, I'm looking for a building just to fit this thing in. And it is in fact two buildings, so it could be a problem. Let's say that one will look good. And it doesn't matter if things match exactly, because we're kind of going to get away with overloading visual noise. The detail of the city will start hiding things. Leaving as simple as that will result in some kind of effect. Not perfectly matched up. We can do better than that. So the other way is you just start selecting from the top and using grow selection to grow until you have buildings. For me, the method I found that works is just working from left to right until I have all the buildings that are in shot, in view, have some kind of front face that works well for them. So when I did this last night, I did every single individual face at a time and just moved them in. Just be very careful about how you're scaling things. So, and actually this one, it's two buildings and there isn't a seam together. I'm just going to use my knife to connect this just so I have a split, so I can separate the two building faces. And yeah, something like this, if I've created a cut like so, and then I want these two individual building faces to be in separate places, I need to use a tool we haven't used in UV before, Rip Region. Right now, if I try and move this thing, it's connected to the other building beside it, it'll distort it. So we really want to avoid scaling things irregularly on the X or Y axis, because that will distort things. But these two front faces, I can just rip region. Oh yeah, and I can bring this too low. And then I'm able to move it, ripped and moved. And I can just try and find a suitable building for this front face. This could be good. Or even up here. And I'm not scaling, I'm just scaling on both the X and Y at the same time. I'm not scaling up or down on either ones. But through experimentation, you might find a good solution. And I'll grab this face and just find another building that I can fit in. Another good tip while you're working like this is that you'll constantly want to see how the texture is looking on the model, but then you'll also want to be jumping back to solid to actually see the mesh. So I would recommend a third window just so you can see your material preview. So I'd right click down on my border here, right click on the edge of the screen to split it, horizontal split. I'll say this one up here is my solid view, this down here will be my material view, and I can just quickly keep tabs on how things are looking as I'm modifying them. Okay, so this part is a little bit tedious, so all I'm going to do is keep doing the same thing, grabbing faces, fitting them in where I can, and then seeing if the result looks good. I'm going to keep going left to right until every building I can see has a decent texture on it. You'll probably go through the same thing I would go through when you're doing something tedious. To start is very precious, and then when you're about halfway through, like just anywhere, just whatever, any of these buildings will do. Below the ground.
like everything that's like.
Sorry, I got my Adobe Creative
There you go.
Premiere. I've updated my Windows, I've updated everything, and it keeps saying like not compatible, update your system. Doesn't work. I don't know why it's not working.
I am doing a low rise building today, so nice and comfortable.
Have you emailed Adobe Technique before? And send them your spec.
Yeah, I would.
I know it seems like
Yeah.
everything to it. I as a manager because it should run. I see it's a new PC.
Yeah.
I see GPU, but yeah.
Yeah, it's the what's it, 4060 or whatever.
Yeah. Why does it give anything else?
Yeah, it's actually doing it, so
Doesn't tell you anything. Well,
all the other one.
yeah. Bless you. Another great thing to use is 3D cursor or 2D cursor within this view. Very useful if you're trying to line things up on specific corners. So I'm trying to grab this building and map it to this very small area here. Using normal scale, you'd be scaling in, move, scale in, move, scale in, move. If I just set my 2D cursor at the corner of this building, I can scale it down where I want it to go. Scale, and it goes right down to that building. So remember your tools. So I've reached a level of finished, at least on one side. And yeah, it doesn't look as pretty as that original image was. And there's all sorts of little warpy bits. But if you needed some background city, something to look out a window and see, you could very quickly create something like this. It was 30 minutes. And if I spent another 30 minutes, I could work on the other sides. You can see the rest of this streaking. Yeah, so it looks kind of crazy from all the other directions. But just from the camera view, there are buildings and they all have some kind of windows and mapping to them. And yeah, I can see issues and errors that I could go through and start tweaking. But for now, that'll be good enough for the next stage where we're just going to add we're basically going to add some emissive lights from the texture wherever there are windows. So some lighting from the texture. Before that, let's take a little break. I think you could use a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. Pause the stream and we'll come back. Save your work.